Hello, good morning, good afternoon, good evening, wherever you are in the world tuning in live here. And for those of you, and you too, and you fellow employees, thank you for joining me for the first demonstration here at IBC 2018. My name is Jason Levine, Principal Worldwide Evangelist for Adobe Creative Cloud, focusing on digital video and audio. And for the next 25 minutes, I'm going to be talking to you about some of the latest innovations coming to the next major updates of Premiere Pro, After Effects, Audition, Character Animator, and Adobe Media Encoder. So for those of you tuning in online, of course, you'll be able to watch the replay of these immediately following this live stream. And we're going to be live streaming multiple presentations throughout the entire week, so you can feel like you're right here in Amsterdam with all of us. Are we a single camera this time around, my friend? Only one camera? As far as you know, oh, there's an audience cam. Let's not use that one right now. Okay. All right, on that note, so let's begin in Premiere Pro and talk about some of the incredible things that we're doing with the Lumetri Color panel. A lot of revisions have been made to Lumetri over the past couple of years since we introduced it. And this time around, we've got some very, very exciting, very special new features. Now, the first one we're going to talk about is the ability now to simply have multiple layers of the Lumetri Color panel. Now, of course, you could always add multiple Lumetri effects to your clips, which you had to actually access via the effects controls. And that was fairly cumbersome and could get very confusing very, very quickly. And if you wanted to enable or disable or reorder things, it just wasn't a very elegant solution. Well, now, you'll notice up at the top here, inside of Lumetri Color, that we have a drop-down which will allow you to create effectively layers that you can access directly from the Lumetri panel itself. So the first one we're on here is called Alexa LUT. The reason for that is that on this particular clip here, we've got an Alexa input LUT here. So of course I can enable or disable this immediately on this layer. Let's go to the second layer here, which I have called Hue versus Sat, which is going to feature some of the new curves that I'll be talking about in a moment. And let's go ahead and rename this to Selective Grading, which is what we're going to talk about. And this is going to allow us to, again, make different changes on this layer. So here we can start to warm this up, maybe adjust the contrast a bit, drop our highlights, maybe go into some creative and do a little bit of vibrance control. And of course, at any point in time, we can disable this so we can see what it looks like before and after. We can go back to the Alexa layer, turn that one off. You get the idea. So you've got complete control over reordering. You can add any number of layers here. It's infinitely more performant than it was before. And again, you never have to access the controls, although you can still do it from the effects controls panel. This just makes life a lot easier and is just genuinely a better, more efficient way to work with Lumetri. And you're going to find that performance-wise, again, it's just the playback is really particularly stellar. Okay. So that's working with multiple layers of Lumetri inside Lumetri Color Panel. Now, talking about curves and talking about reimagining color grading for everyone. Anyone who's used Lumetri knows there are many different modules. And in particular, we had something previously called the Hue Saturation Wheel, which is sort of a non-standard way to allow you to adjust saturation across multiple hues in this kind of circular fashion. Well, we heard from a lot of you that that wasn't the most ideal way to do sort of very specific selective grading. And additionally, again, if you had to add multiple layers of those, it just wasn't very elegant. So we went back to the drawing board, and really it was about solving a design problem. How do we present curves in a more standard way? And you can see just looking right here in this sort of horizontal fashion, much more standard, but also give users something a little bit unique, a little bit different. Well, in steps something called selective color grading, where we have 5 new curves that are going to allow you to do things like hue versus saturation, hue versus hue, hue versus luma, luma versus sat, or sat versus sat, right here inside the curves panel, easily, effectively. And if you're new to grading, you're really going to start to understand how all of these things work against your image. So let's take this first shot here. And maybe one of the things that we want to do is simply intensify or increase or warm up the skin tones. So over in Hue versus Sat, I'm going to come over here and select my familiar Adobe eyedropper, come over here and try and find sort of a neutral point on her face. And when I do that, immediately you'll see that we have 3 control points here. By the way, I know we're live, but I need to turn on my accessibility so I can zoom in so that you can see what I'm talking about. Just give me 1 second here to do that. There we go. All right. This will all be worth it, I promise. Okay. So we click the eyedropper, and we give you 3 control points. The center control point being sort of that main hue that we selected. All right. Now I'm going to hold down the Shift key, which is going to allow me to constrain a range. But watch what happens when I click on this control point. Now you'll see that when we go north of the graph here, north of the line, we are increasing the skin tones. And if I go south of the line, we are decreasing or desaturating. So hue versus sat allows you very simply, very elegantly, to adjust the saturation of a particular selected hue. Increase, decrease, using our scopes accordingly. Brilliant. We can widen the range. We can add additional control points if we so desire. But I love this. And again, just focusing on the UI here, here's a little bit of that uniqueness. Again, you can see visually, yes, we're increasing saturation. We're decreasing saturation. We're visually giving you that indicator right here inside the hue versus sat graph. Of course, we can do multiple colors here as well. Let's maybe go into some of the blues in the sky. Same thing, if I don't constrain, again, this will let me move a little bit more freely here. Very quickly make those adjustments. Maybe move this over a little bit more to the reds, something like that, okay? And you'll notice we've got this scrolling bar here. Again, this is one of those unique, only to be found in Premiere Pro, unique pieces to this new reimagined curve style. Because traditionally, if you were working on reds or in the skin tones, this is what you'd be fighting, right? You'd be dealing with the red sort of crossing the graph in this way. Now, this is standard. This is the way people are used to it. But we wanted to make this better, easier, more intuitive. So we have this little slider here that allows you to bring those reds right into view, do your control, do your operation. And again, we can A/B against the original and the new one at any point in time. It plays back wonderfully in 2K, 4K, 6K, 8K, whatever your flavor, very easily, hue versus sat. All right? And if I just kind of skip along to a couple other options here, a couple other examples. Here's another cool one where we've done, if we just look at the original shot here, so lots going on here in this shot, and the director found that this sort of green tarp was just, it was distracting, and it was kind of taking focus away from the subject, from the girl dancing in the foreground. So again, we made our selection on those greens. Again, I'm going to hold my shift here so you can see the hue of that, right? That particular saturated green. We just needed to pull that down, which is just naturally going to draw our eye more in focus to the central subject there, very quickly, very easily. And again, with uninterrupted playback, we can enable or disable this as we're playing back to really see our changes in real time. Super cool, super efficient, really nice. Okay, so that's a little bit on hue versus sat. Now, I'm not going to cover all of these, but let's go into hue versus hue. Now, whereas hue versus sat allows you to adjust the saturation of a particular hue, hue versus hue is going to allow us to adjust the hue of an existing hue or change the hue of something that you're currently seeing. So in this particular shot, I thought it might be cool if all of the girls had the same sort of color outfits. You can see there's 2 girls here standing with this kind of magenta outfits, and I thought that would be cool. Maybe we can change all the other dresses to that same hue. So once again, I'll take my eyedropper. I'll make a selection on the dress. Again, I can verify my selection right here. Let's go ahead and hold down our Shift key. And now, when I do this, now check this out. I'm going to see if I can zoom in simultaneously here. Before we saw how it was showing us increased saturation north of the line, decreased saturation south of the line. Well, now that we're in hue versus hue, when I click on this, now it's showing you the hues that you'll be moving to. So if I go, let's try to see if I can zoom out now. If I go north here, you can see that or let me start south. We're going into the oranges, the yellows, the greens. But I want to go into those magentas, so we'll go north here, find the hue that's just right. Now everyone's wearing approximately the same color dresses. Wind it back, hit play, and just like that, make those adjustments, right? Visually, so cool, so easy to understand. Can't emphasize enough how this really changes the way you start thinking about grading, particularly if you're not a pro colorist. If you're a pro colorist, you'll love this. If you're just starting and these things scare you, we give you visual indicators to really understand what's happening, okay? Again, we've got 3 more scopes here, hue versus luma, luma versus sat, sat versus sat. Come back later when I'm showing you the full Premiere Pro demonstration. You'll get to see all of those. That's just a little taste of what's coming in Premiere Pro. Okay, 2 more quick things I want to show you here in Premiere. Let's go ahead and start with some motion graphics templates and some of the changes we've made there. and I'll bounce into my graphics workspace as well. Okay. So for those of you unfamiliar with motion graphics templates, these were elements that we introduced last year following, was it Adobe Max, Carl? Yes, it was. Motion graphics templates in Adobe Stock. I should know. I wrote the song about it. And this allows you to bring in After Effects created templates using all of the power and animation and effects of After Effects directly inside of Premiere Pro. Now we've got After Effects playback engine in Premiere so that you see as I scrub through this motion graphics template, it begins caching those frames so we get into real time. Now when I'm in the Essential Graphics editor here, you'll notice that we've got a couple of parameters that we can edit manually, but then we have this new field here, spreadsheet data. What? Yes, now I think it was last year, I'm forgetting when we've released all of these things, in the After Effects, we allowed the ability to create motion graphics templates with something called DDG, or data-driven graphics, where you can leverage CSV or TSV files to power or provide the data for the animation that you're building in After Effects. Well, now we've brought that power and flexibility into motion graphics templates, now accessible through Premiere. So if you've authored a template in After Effects that uses a spreadsheet to provide data for different fields, different numerical values, different color values, you can swap out, change, and modify that CSV data within Premiere without ever having to go back to After Effects. So one more extension of the motion graphics template and more flexibility when using these natively inside the application. So when I click on Edit Spreadsheet Data here, and by the way, what is the data that we're looking at? So this is something about recurring dreams, 83% of women. Okay, let's go into Edit Spreadsheet Data here, and I'm going to choose Browse. And I'm going to browse to a couple of my CSV files. So I've got one here. Let's go into this one here, Data-Driven 2. Click Open on this. It's going to import that file. Now right away you may have noticed that the data has already changed. And more importantly, now we can see all the various fields that are contained in this CSV file. Now, because they're part of the CSV, these are not editable by themselves in this panel. However, if you want to override settings in the CSV, we can go into something like unmapped, and I can change at home to something like at the gym, all right? And it automatically updates that, okay? So it'll update automatically, or we can go back to our originally scripted piece of text there, okay? So really easy to swap out these fields. You may have noticed here, by the way, you can see they even added hex value color swatches. Now this is just how the designer built this. Of course, if you want to be able to add editable color values into a motion graphics template, it's just as simple as using a color fill and dragging those properties into the template. They just chose to use hex values here. Anyone who's a full-time designer who works in Photoshop probably knows hex values, so you can make those modifications here if you so desire. The idea being that it's very easy to swap out and modify the CSV data very, very quickly. Now, taking it a step further where we've got sort of more data in place, let's take a look at this particular template. So here, what you can see, what's editable directly inside the panel is that we have this slider here, which is going to cycle through a whole series of different values from that CSV file, which contains different names and occupations of the various people in this particular film. All of this footage, by the way, provided by Silber Salz out of Stuttgart, Germany. Very thankful to have all their content with us here. But you'll also notice, and we're going to show this a little bit more in After Effects in a couple of moments, that you also have some text controls. Yes. So one of the things that was a limitation in the previous iteration of motion graphics templates is that if you were having them authored on the After Effects side, there was no way for you to make the font style, and perhaps the faux styling editable to the Premiere editor. You'd have to go back to the original motion graphics template, AEP, the After Effects project, in After Effects to make those changes. We are now allowing you to add text modifications, properties, and styling directly as part of the template, which is what you can see here. So if we wanted to change this font, again, you can choose all of your Typekit, your Adobe fonts. It's everything that you know. It works exactly as you would assume. Here's all the various weights and styles. And again, if there were faux styles, you could have that enabled as well. But in terms of the spreadsheet data, again, when you have this, if we take a look here, this kind of gives you an idea of how this is laid out. And for something like a lower third, it's quite brilliant, where you can imagine Yeah, just give us that CSV that has everybody's name and their role and the color banner that you want used, and we can very easily swap those out in the template as they appear on screen accordingly. So if we wanted to change this, again, I can go into our browse here, and let's try this one, hoping this is a different one with different value. It is. Okay, so there you go. So here's Janine Edelstein, surgeon. And same concept applies. If we wanted to modify these here, we could do that. I want to also point out that these CSV files are live. They're actually live feeding the motion graphics template here in Premiere. So what does that mean? Well, you know, again, if you think of sort of a broadcast context where you might be pulling these CSV files off of a network storage, if someone is editing that CSV, when they save their changes, those changes will automatically update inside of Premiere. It is reading live CSV data. So to prevent that from happening, you might just want to lock off a CSV that you're using in production, because things will be changing before your eyes. And you won't necessarily know why. So it is actually feeding that live data. It's not sort of cached in there. As changes are made and saved, it will begin updating before your very eyes. So very, very cool to have this new Essential Graphics workflow with data-driven graphics supported and new text controls. You'll also notice these little twirl downs, because now we also have content control grouping in your motion graphics templates when building them in After Effects as well. So many cool things here to show you. Okay, very quickly, because we've got to move to After Effects. Go back to our editing workspace here for a second. New support for VR 180. So you will know that over the last couple of years, we've been focusing a lot on adding support for VR 360 content with ambisonic audio. In this latest release, we are now offering support for VR 180 stereoscopic. So here, if I go ahead and just, turn on my VR viewer, as mentioned, stereoscopic, VR 180 by nature, by default, oh, my text layer got out of whack there, is stereoscopic. So this is kind of showing you here, this was just shot in my backyard. By the way, if you're wondering why we're looking at this anaglyph view, go into settings here, you can see now, here's a perfect reason to use those. Now, if we don't want to edit an anaglyph, we don't have to. You can simply look at a single eye here. So this is what the shot looks like. Again, I'm working off of proxies. This was captured in 6K with a Z-Cam, so at 60 frames per second, I believe. So super high footage. I made a proxy so that I can very easily scrub and move through this all here. The nice thing about this is that it uses some newly modified but otherwise familiar effects that you'll already know if you've been working with VR 360. So really easy to kind of segue into this new VR 180 world and continue using the effects and processes that you already know. So here you can see in terms of VR projection, you've got some additional options here, stretch to fill, input auto VR properties, again, using our auto detect VR capabilities in Premiere. In this case, stereoscopic side by side. You could change input and output if necessary here. And then you've got your disparity adjustment. So if you want to widen or narrow the stereo field, again, this is where being in the anaglyph view is going to assist with you there. All right. So we can make adjustments to our stereo like that. Okay. Not exactly a lot of stuff going on in this shot in my backyard. The one day where nothing was happening. No sound. I have my ambisonic soundtrack here. There wasn't so much as a bird chirping. That's me yelling that there was nothing happening. Anyway, so new support for VR 180. Super cool. Find out more about this here at the show and at the pods if you want to learn more about VR 180. And you can actually see it using the Adobe Immersive Environment headset at the booth just behind us here. Okay, let's move over to After Effects. One really quick cool thing to talk to you about here. Well, two, actually. We'll talk a little bit about depth passes and, again, adding font and text controls to your motion graphics templates. So depth passes effectively are going to allow you to use the native 3D, either via the classic 3D renderer or the Cinema 4D renderer, to build out and create depth mats directly in After Effects using its native 3D tool. So you never have to leave AE to do this work. So what you can see here, we've got this animation, little vector art that was created by our friend Mark Woloshuk here, that we wanted to, again, create that sort of 3D perspective and create these 3D depth passes. Now, we've had 3D channel effects in After Effects for quite some time, but they had sort of limited use because you had to use them in conjunction with 3D that was built outside of After Effects, and it had to really conform to a very specific series of parameters to leverage those properly. Just wasn't really elegant and ideal. Well, now, if we go into effects controls, once you have your composition, if you simply pre-compose it, if there is 3D information in there, it will be able to extract the depth matte instantly. So if we just take a look here, let me turn off our girl here. I turned on the 3D channel extract. This is now showing you the depth matte. So you can see further away from the camera, darker, closer to the camera in white. And then as I started adding different effects here, like fog, and again, I kind of modified the color of the fog to fit in more with the scene. We added a little depth of field because naturally, as this is further away, not only should it be darker and kind of dissipate into the background, but it should also be a bit blurry. So we've got our depth of field, and then we've got two depth mattes here acting like wipes to kind of reveal that graphic on screen. Again, kind of wind this back, right, as it's caching those frames to kind of give you an idea of what this looks like very, very quickly. All right, super cool. Again, all done natively. This one is actually using the classic 3D renderer. Okay, and the performance is pretty amazing here. Let's go into kind of real time right now. There we go. Give it a second to fill in. All right. That roto job, which actually Carl is going to talk about a little bit later, is leveraging the new Mocha plugin. So for those of you using Mocha, there's an updated version of Mocha in the latest version coming to After Effects that's accessible via a plugin. So much easier to do your roto and masking. Oh, I don't even have it turned on. There it is. Okay, I was wondering, why is she behind them? Now she's in front of them again. Okay, so that's just a little bit with depth passes and depth mattes. This is just showing you one more example here, something where we were again using this is now using the Cinema 4D render engine. You know this because we have text extrusion, right? This is one of the benefits of having the C4D engine natively here. Go into those effects controls. Again, same thing as with before. All right, if we were to take a look here, you can see, again, we've got our 3D channel effect on there, our depth of field to blur that out, a little bit of hue sat to make that fit in better with the background. Okay. Nice, very cool. All right, kind of give you an idea of what that looks like. Again, all done right inside of After Effects without ever having to leave the interface. Super, super cool. Okay, we've got to move on. I just want to show you one more thing here with regard to data-driven graphics. Actually, you know what? I'll find this. I'll go into the responsive ones here just to talk a little bit about fonts. Switch over to my graphics workspace here. Okay. Just trying to show this very, very quickly. So you will now see that when you drag in text from an After Effects comp, okay, so here's our first line of source text, which I've dropped in over here. You will now see that when you do that, you will have an Edit Properties button. And when you go into Edit Properties, this is now where you can access the changes that you'll allow the editors to make to your motion graphics templates in the Premiere environment. So before, there was no way for them to change the font, to change the style. Now you can enable this as a motion designer. So you can say, enable custom font selection, enable font size adjustment, enable faux styles. We can turn on all of these things. And when you do that, and we click into Essential Graphics, now you can see that this is exactly what they'll see, right? Sizer, style, font choice. Again, same font menu that you have in Premiere's Essential Graphics. It'll sort through your favorites, through all of your various typekit fonts, and then faux styling if you want. So just that simple control, that simple additional ability now makes it so much easier for the editor to further modify and really leverage your design creations if you so choose. Now, if you don't want people to edit the font choice, you simply don't have to add those options in there just as before. But now they can do this much easier, much more efficiently with this new feature. Okay, real quickly over to Audition. Want to show you first and foremost new UI, new colors, new layout. We're going to cover a lot of this later when I show you Audition at the end of the day. If you just kind of take a look at the track layouts here, so much prettier and elegant. The colors really pop. We're borrowing now our color palette that you have in Premiere Pro as well. So your predefined colors, custom colors, you can modify these hues. It just makes the whole environment so much better, so much easier to work with. We're also offering two new restoration effects in the form of noise reduction and reverb reduction, denoise and de-reverb. So if we go into our noise reduction here, you will see inside the menu a brand new denoiser, a brand new de-reverb effect. What's really nice about these, and we're not going to hear them in the booth here, so I'm not going to worry about doing this until later today. Really simple, really intuitive. It gives you 5 basic processing controls, which are going to allow you to either do full broadband noise reduction across all frequencies, in this case, focusing on lower frequencies. Okay, and you can see the graph here showing that to you. This is obviously going to be focused on mids, right? This is focusing on, so let's say you had noise that was low-end rumble or hum and hiss, but we want to leave the mids alone where the voices live. This is the one you might select for that. And of course, focusing more on high pass, low cut in this case. So you can choose your processing focus, a single slider to adjust your amount. This is a brand new algorithm. It sounds wonderful. You can use far less of it with fewer artifacts. I highly recommend checking that out, as well as the de-reverb, and I'll cover that later today. This is one of those holy grail things, right? You've got something that's got a lot of echo. You want to try and save that take. It's not going to preserve and fix everything, but it's something worth checking out. I think you'll really dig it, and it's very easy to use, and it's really just a matter of auditioning it and hearing and seeing what you have, and again, just trying to restore that back to a broadcast type state with de-reverb and de-noise. Okay, lastly, Character Animator. Okay, we're going to go into a new thing here called Characterizer. Now, Characterizer was something that we actually sneaked at Max a year ago in a stills version, i.e. non-moving, that was known then as Puppetron, which is the ability to create a puppet from your face using the camera and then merging it with any kind of reference artwork to create sort of a puppetized version of yourself. Well, now we allow you to do this. It'll be in this next version of After Effects. And actually what I have here very quickly is I made some slides just to kind of show you what the process is like. I'm not going to do it here because we don't have enough time. But let me kind of show you what it looks like. So the first thing that you're going to do is when you say create new capture, all right, is that it's going to use, again, the camera here.
Characterizer. We're going to walk through a short process to capture your facial features.
All right, so we're actually not going to do that because I've already pre-defined this for you here. But so it's going to step you through a bunch of things where you're going to say a bunch of things and make a bunch of expressions. And then when you do that, what it's doing is it's capturing all of the facial motions. Then it's going to have you say a bunch of things. And from this, it's going to create all of the visemes and mouth shapes that will accompany your puppet. Following that, you then have the option to choose different types of pictures or references that you'd like to stylize or characterize yourself in the style of. So I took a picture of George Washington on the dollar bill, use that as a reference, and you see here what it has you do is identify things like face, hair, neck, and clothing in your reference image right on screen. And then when you do that, then it's going to allow you to instantly characterize yourself in the style of that particular image. So as you can see, I've already created my cutout puppet of my head. Let me go ahead and choose that here. And now if I went to something like that dollar bill, what it will now do is it will create a stylized version of me in the flavor of George Washington. Now you've got a couple of cool controls here. If I stylize more to the left or less stylization, it's going to look more like me. But again, in that familiar sort of style. As I go more to the right, it now begins morphing our faces together, so I really become much more presidential. I don't know about that exactly. Here, let's go to something like, these are super cool, these creepy stone ones down here. This is some really neat stuff. Again, gets very, very intense looking there. Maybe back off on the style. You've also got feature exaggeration. So if I go more to the right here, it'll sort of narrow out my face. It's taking a second to render our puppet. All right, there we go. We've also got cycles here. This is going to allow you to cycle through different sort of moving parts of your puppet so that it always seems like it's kind of moving even when you're not talking. All right, so this kind of gets really cool very quickly. This will also accept things like head turns as well. And once you're done with that, when you click on Generate, what that will do is it will build the puppet, and you'll instantly have a puppeted version of yourself that will animate in Character Animator in a matter of seconds. So right now it's actually building the puppet based on all of my facial expressions. This one really kind of merged our looks together. You can even see, even in terms of the hair and things, how it brought it all together in this kind of creepy stone image. Okay, here it comes. Give it one more second here. It's creating all the expressions, all the visemes. We've got Carl and Niels coming up next. All right, I'm eating up your time. Sorry about that. You're broken up about it, I can see. Okay. Hold on. That looks nothing like me. Okay, here we go. It's almost done. There it is. And there we go. So here, if I do my rest pose, all right. So now it's animating, and whoops, I turned that off. Wrong button. Wait for camera. There we go. So now it's animating and doing its thing, and in just a couple of seconds, I created this weird stone-like version of myself based off of any reference image just by using the native camera and microphone. Those are just some of the amazing innovations coming to the next updates of the digital video and audio applications. Thank you so much for joining me. Coming up next, we've got Carl Soule and Neil Stevens talking to you about team projects, true project collaboration with After Effects, Premiere, Media Encoder, and more. So stick around for that. Have a great rest of your day here at IBC Day 1. We'll see you again next time. Thanks, everybody. Bye-bye.